Alrighty, so today I'm hitting you guys with another video, and this one it's gonna be about the movie Scream, the 1996 version of the movie Scream. I just watched it the other day on Blu-ray. I got it downstairs with my PS5, so I don't have it with me to show to you guys right here. But basically, I had heard some rumblings about how meta this movie is, and just out of interest, Shaggy's in it, that kind of thing. I ended up picking it up from a secondhand store and watching it on Blu-ray the other day. And I almost didn't make a video on this movie because I have feelings about it, but I kind of was dwelling on it for a couple days. But yeah, I feel like I need to talk about it. So here we are. So I watched the 1996 Scream, and for those that don't know, this is basically your classic movie that the Ghostface costume comes from. Ghostface is like the bad guy. And, the scenes where she's picking up the phone and he's like, "I'm going to kill you," like type thing. That is this movie. Okay. The other thing about this movie is that it has the guy that plays Shaggy, Matthew Lillard, and he does a great job, like being basically the same character, but in this scenario. That's, I guess, something I'll talk about a little bit later. But the 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 whole thing about this movie is it's like a classic horror movie, and the premise is that there's this guy going around, and he's wearing this costume, and he's calling people up on a phone, and he's killing people. People don't know why. He's like first serial killer in the town, and the side sort of plot that's unfolding is you're learning more information about the main character Sydney's mom and her passing away, her murder that happened, I guess, a year prior. And there's some controversy around that about who she was as a person and things like that. It adds somewhat of another layer to the movie. And then I guess worth talking about is the aspect of the movie where you've got this guy that works at the video store, and he is talking about movies, the whole movie, and horror movies and stuff like that, and sort of relating that to this scenario. And in that way, he presents sort of like a meta perspective of the movie as a whole. So, I guess like the movie came out in 1996, so I'm not gonna like worry about saying spoilers or whatever. So I'm just gonna kind of give my thoughts. So we start out with a very interesting opening where we're basically, for lack of a better term, watching the first victim to our knowledge get murdered, and her boyfriend as well, and then her parents find her at home, and we kind of get our first intro to who this Ghostface character is, but there's really no motive or understanding as to why he's doing it to this person. And you kind of get dropped into this situation, and now we start the movie. Then we circle back to our actual main character being the Sydney character, and kind of like they're talking about it at school. They're like, oh, the two characters, Billy and Stuart, are like, oh, or maybe the guy's a hunter. Maybe, sometimes there's a difference between people like me and people like them who just gut somebody, which is just like, it was cliche, but or silly sounding, and it obviously is kind of letting you get an idea that these characters might be the people that we're talking about, but it's not so full-throated that you're like, okay, it's definitely these people or whatever. But then as the movie goes on, you see that Sydney is definitely like the next target of this murder, because whatever's going on, people are basically circling around her. Her dad's been gone and nobody can get a hold of her and of him. And then as the movie goes on, there's like multiple attempts at her life that she is able to sidestep up until this big party that happens where multiple characters kind of fall victim to this fate, and things like that. So long story short, they kind of talk about the villain a little bit. The villain clearly has a fixation on Sydney because keeps calling her up, keeps messing with her. Her dad's gone. Nobody knows why. The police are involved too. There's like Deputy Dewey, who's the brother of Sydney's like best girlfriend, I guess. And basically the story unfolds like any other horror movie would, where we set ourselves up for the climactic event of, we're gonna have this big party, and this is where everything's gonna climax and go down. And before that, basically, Ghostface makes an attempt on Sydney's life, and Billy, her boyfriend at the time, shows up right afterward, and she suspects Billy is the person that's doing it. Nobody really suspects that there could be more than one person at this time period in the movie. And so, she automatically thinks it's him. He gets sent to the police, but then I guess he's exonerated. And you, as a member of the audience, as easy as it would be to be like, no, it was definitely that guy. It's too convenient. You do kind of be like, well, I mean, he wasn't there. His phone records check out. Like, what are you going to do? And then later on, you find out that her dad was the one that was making the calls, or so we think, right? And anyway, that's sort of the middle of the movie. We end up at this party, right? So I'm not going to get into everything because it's just like, I think there's a lot of value in watching this movie, but the long story short is that it climaxes in the big fight between, the characters in the movie who survive and the ones who don't, and also the bad guys. And essentially what we find out, and here's the big spoiler alert, so if you're actually trying not to be spoiled by this, then don't listen to me right now, skip forward about 30 seconds. But we find out that Billy and Stuart are both the enemy, and that they have orchestrated this stuff all the way from the beginning with Sydney's mom. And they've kidnapped her dad and cloned his cell phone and done all this stuff in order to obscure themselves from the actual crime. And they're the ones committing the crime because they're just crazy. They're just crazy. And at least that's what Stuart thinks, until Billy lets it out that, the Sydney's mom was kind of a promiscuous affair-having wife in a way. And she had been the one that hooked up with Billy's dad and caused their parents' divorce way back in the past, I guess. And so that's why he initially killed her mom, and now he's coming after all these people because once he got a taste of it, he just is crazy, right? And so, I will say things I like about the movie. I like that it is sort of this classic type horror film in the way where it wraps itself up really nicely by the end, and there are like small, dumb subplots that, in a normal, serious movie would be very silly and kind of annoying. Almost in a horror movie like this, they tend to, I don't know, like they just tend to be a little bit more welcomed. They tend to be a little bit more at home at a place like this. And then, I like that aspect of the movie. I like the premise that we've got these two kids that go crazy and they're getting the people all over town, and they're doing the weird phone call thing, and they've got a knife and the costume that you can find everywhere or whatever. The whole aspect of that I thought was pretty good. And the steps that the movie tries to take to be meta, I think is interesting. But I think the way that it was delivered, looking at it in a 2024 lens, is kind of cheesy, kind of corny. But again, I just said that campy corniness is interesting in a horror film, or at least at home there. And so maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh on it. I just felt like the character that worked at the movie store, that was, calling out all these rules of a horror film, and then they would directly have a scene that mapped to that situation in the movie. I felt like it was slightly too heavy-handed. Like the moment, it was cool when he was dropping little things here and there, and then you start to think about it yourself as an audience member. Like, yeah, this is what I'm experiencing, and that's what I have experienced in horror movies in the past. But what I did not appreciate was the scene where he literally got up and was like, "You guys don't know the rules?" and started going through it. I just felt like that was a little bit gratuitous, and maybe could have been done a different way. But then again, it was 1996 and we didn't have the same level of like meta commentary that we have now, and it wasn't as popular. So in a way, it was probably like a real cheeky thing to do back then, and was more interesting than it is now, right? And so I want to give it that credit. The one thing that I noticed about this movie that really does show its age, and again, I know that this is like sort of a thing in horror movies, so I'm trying not to be like annoying, but I was just really bothered by the relationship between Billy and Sydney, because they basically did absolutely no effort in building up their relationship to make us feel like it was real. And the whole movie, Billy's just like, bruh, when am I gonna get laid? Come on. Like being kind of one of the worst guys that you could ever be, and being very pushy and being annoying in that way. And then a normal person in real life would be like, ooh, this guy's nasty. I don't understand why he's trying to manipulate me, and I don't want to be with him anymore, I would imagine. I know that we're talking about high schoolers when we say the context of this movie, but I would imagine even high schoolers feel that way. I wouldn't really know, obviously, but regardless, then it ending up being the scene in the movie where later on, because she feels bad because she's withheld sex because her mom died and she's feeling a way about that, we also see Billy go off and talk to other girls at the video store. And then we have another scene where basically like they have a sex scene between Sydney and Billy just because they inserted that in the movie, and maybe they thought audiences needed something like that in order to be continually interested in the movie. But I think the movie stands on its own without that, and it reminds me of my review of The Net, where we see like, she basically has sex with the guy that ends up being the villain for no reason. Like it's just in the movie to be in the movie. I don't know what kind of psychological research they've done at these movie studios during that time period to either say, oh, to get a guy to watch a movie that has a female lead, we have to do this. Or if we're going to have a female in a movie, in order for the female to feel genuine fear, we have to have a scene like this because this plays to a certain emotional aspect. But, I'm obviously not a female, so I can't speak to whether or not that's actually effective. But it just seems like some real, like, women would not do this, And so to have the scene play out that way and do it like that, and knowing that, the whole thing's produced by a man, it just comes across weird. I'm really not trying to be like some woke, whatever, but it's just like, I have to be honest in the fact that it did not play well in the movie, and it could have been absolutely not in the movie, and it would have made pretty much no difference to the outcome of the movie, right? So can we just in the future avoid doing that? And I think we have. I think for the most part, new movies come out and don't really have that problem. And I only see this when I go back and find movies from the 80s and 90s. And so maybe that just speaks more to the drought of the 80s. But regardless, I did enjoy Scream. I thought the meta commentary was interesting, especially with the perspective of knowing that this movie came out in 1996. And I think as far as like a classic horror movie, slasher movie affair, this thing really is probably the blueprint that other movies went to follow later on, And I'm not saying that completely, because I'm sure that this movie takes a lot from other previous movies as well, literally to the point of explaining the rules of horror movies as meta commentary in the movie, right? So I'm not saying they came up with anything, but I just think that this movie executes on the premise really well, minus the couple of things that I did not like about it, like the sex scene, or like the kind of gratuitousness towards the end about the meta commentary. But all in all, would I recommend you guys go and watch Scream if you have the original on your streaming services, or if you have the Blu-ray or DVD at home, or if you see it out in public for $1. I got the triple pack of 1, 2, and 3 together as a Blu-ray set, and I think it has like all the commentary and stuff like that. Like I think it was a first collection release maybe. I got that for $20 at the exchange. It's a little bit rich, to be honest, for a used Blu-ray, but I felt like it was worth it because I got all 3 movies, and I'm planning on watching a lot of these movies during Halloween, October time. So that being said, would I recommend you guys watch it? Absolutely. Would I recommend you buy it? If you buy it on Blu-ray, I'd recommend you scoop this thing up for like $8 at the most. $5 probably is a much better idea in my head of what the secondhand value of this should be. But maybe people like this movie more than I do. So that being said, if we got to put it out of 5, put it on the one-shot scale, I would say that, this movie is something you should watch if you're interested in movies like this. And it is a solid movie, and it delivers on the premise, and it has some interesting aspects to it that other horror movies do not. But ultimately, it does have some jank that it could have done without. I don't think anybody would argue with me on that. And I would say, with that being said, I would rate this movie a very strong 3 to a light 4. Because it holds up well. Like if I had to think of a list of movies that I think I should recommend to people around Halloween time, now that I have seen this movie, this would make the list. So with that being said, that's the review. We gave it a strong 3 to a light 4. Let me know what you guys think about this movie in the comments below. If you made it to this point in the video, please comment in the comments below. I would love to know what you guys think. I would also am the type of person that likes to take feedback and improve things based on that. So I see that the watch time on these is kind of low for some people, and I can understand that. I watch YouTube too. But if you could help me understand, what you feel like you would want to see more from me, let me know. So that being said, that's the review. That was the original Scream from 1996, and I will catch you guys with the next one.